what do you do when the world demands that you be good, but punishes you for it? And what do you do when even the gods who ask you to be good in the first place have no idea how to help you survive? Maybe the question was why the world requires you to stop being one. There's a strange experiment hidden inside a play. It drops you inside it. 3 gods arrive on Earth looking for the good human being. They find one, and that is when the real problem begins. To understand this play, you have to step into the mind of the man who builds it. A man forced out of his country begins writing about a world where survival itself becomes a moral problem. That instinct to see through the language of power never left him. By the time it was written in exile between 1938 and 1941, Bertolt Brecht already spent decades watching how system bend human behavior. He had realized that morality isn't a choice, it's a luxury tax most of us can't afford to pay. He wrote a play called The Good Person of Szechwan, but he wasn't writing about a woman in China. He was writing a diagnostic report on the death of the soul in a market economy. Somewhere in the shadow of World War I, a generation was raised on a sentence. It is sweet and honorable to die for one's country. Imagine a classroom in 1914. Outside, the world is busy, sharpening its knives, preparing for a slaughter it hasn't yet found a name for. And inside, a student is handed a sentence to write an essay about. It's an old sentence, Roman, high-minded. It's been echoing through European hallways for generations, polished by poets and politicians until it shines like a medal. Most of the boys in that room heard trumpets when they read those words. They saw statues of themselves in the town square. But Bertolt Brecht, he saw it was a slogan, a bit of code injected into the collective consciousness to make the meat grinder of war look like a sacrifice, to make the destruction of a generation feel sweet. That was the moment the observer was born. He realized that power doesn't just use guns and bread, it uses grammar. It uses the stories we tell ourselves while we are falling. And once you see that the noble narrative is just a structural necessity for the state, you don't ever look at a story the same way again. Think of the outsider archetype. The kid who runs away with the gypsy carnival because the real world feels like an hallucination. That kid isn't running away from home. Once you understand that noble sacrifice is just a linguistic trick, you never look at a good person the same way again. In the unstable creative chaos of Berlin, everything is unstable. Art is experimental. Reality feels editable. Brecht moves through this world as an observer of patterns. Traditional theater tries to make you forget where you are. Brecht wants you to sit there, look at the stage, and realize you are watching a system being performed. He wants distance. He develops what becomes known as the alienation effect, a way of forcing the audience to remain aware. In 1933, Brecht goes into exile. From the outside, something becomes clearish and more disturbing. The illusion of instability collapses into something rigid. So he leaves. It's in that distance, in Denmark, that he builds a moral laboratory. The Good Person of Szechwan. Exile is a strange position. You are outside the system, but not free from it. There's a poem, Into Those Born Later. He stops pretending. He doesn't defend his time. He writes about eating between battles, sleeping among murderers, forgetting half so loud, because the system made softness unaffordable. So when he builds the Good Woman of Szechwan, he's asking, what happens to it when the world makes it impossible to be good? And that's when you realize we are not only physically trapped, we are artistically caged. The story begins almost innocently. A water seller named Wang is walking through the city, surrounded by slogans, signs, messages telling people what to believe, how to live, what counts as virtue. He doesn't question the system itself, only whether anyone is still capable of meeting its expectations. When he encounters something extraordinary, he feels a relief. Finally, there's authority and there should be answers. They aren't there to fix the world, they're just checking the box. They arrive with a condition. Is there one good person left? Just one. When they arrive, citizens shout to their doors. Eventually, Wang's finds Shente. Shente offers them shelters. Shente is a prostitute, someone whose rare survival is a negotiation. And she's the only one who says yes. She's not protected by any system, and still the only one willing to help without expecting something in return. That's important. Her goodness doesn't come from ideology, it comes from vulnerability. She's rewarded, giving money a chance to live properly. So, she opens a tobacco shop, tries to build a life that aligns with what is expected of a good person. But the environment she lives in doesn't change, just because she does. Poverty and desperation remains. People continue to need more than she can give, and slowly something shifts. In the whole of its script, this is where she transforms into a lady. But Brecht doesn't care about transformations. He cares about pressure. He builds a cage around her, a neighborhood, an economy that only ticks. As soon as Shante is handed the shop, her little island of stability, the system begins its extraction. There are the human consequences of the world outside her door, and Shante starts to crack. She splits. There's a version of her that wants to give, to help, to remain open. So she does only thing that biological organism can do when it's being crashed. So she adapts. She invents a cousin named Shuta. When Shuta arrives, it's just that Shante is in a men's suit, but the suit changes the physics of the room. Shuta doesn't feel pity. Shuta negotiates. He evicts the parasites and stops the bleeding. Just as the pressure begins to build, something else enters the system. Shanta finds a man in a park trying to hang himself, young son. An unemployed pilot, a man whose entire identity, flying, has been grounded by a broken economy. She saves him, and instantly she's addicted to the idea of fixing him. To get young son a job, it requires a bribe of 500 silver dollars. Shanta pledges to help him, completely ignoring her own survival. But when she puts the suit back on, the firewall activates. Shweta meets the pilot, and Shweta sees exactly what the boy is, a grifter. The pilot admits he has no intention of paying back Shanta's loans. He just wants the money to get his wings back. He's going to abandon her. And here is where play twists the knife. When Shanta takes the suit off, she knows the truth. She knows he's a parasite, and she agrees to marry him anyway. Why? Because loneliness is also a structural condition. In a world this cold, the illusion of love is worth going bankrupt for. The wedding never happens because the wedding isn't a romantic union, it's a business transaction. Young son realizes the capital isn't there. Without the full amount of cash, he walks away. Shante is left sitting in a cheap restaurant, holding the ashes of her own delusion. If the story stopped there, it will be a tragedy. But Brecht pushes it into a horror story. Shante realizes she's pregnant. Everything shifts. Goodness was a luxury she couldn't afford for herself, but to protect her unborn child in a world made of teeth. goodness is a liability she has to assassinate. She puts on the suit of Shuita, and this time she doesn't take it off. The temporary mask becomes the permanent face. She takes the empty cabins of a wealthy local barber and turns them into a tobacco sweatshop. She becomes the ultimate capitalist, and in the bleakest irony of the entire play, she hires her ex-lover, the desperate pilot, and turns him into a ruthless factory foreman. The broken man becomes the enforcer of the broken system. Months pass, Shuta grows fat. As Shanta hidden beneath the suite, her pregnancy swollen. The neighborhood starts to whisper, they miss Shanta, the girl who gave them everything. Looking at those bloated, ruthless businessmen, they come to the only logical conclusion a fairy tale allows. Assuming the businessmen murdered the good girl. That murder was unnecessary, the environment just processed her. The logical conclusion of all this extraction is a courtroom. Shuta is arrested. The charge is murder. Neighborhood has decided that the only way the ruthless businessman could exist is if he killed the girl. They bring him before the judges. Shuta bribes the judges, but they are replaced by the gods on the day of the trial. This is where the play descends into a full-blown existential fever dream. The ultimate authorities of morality are forced to preside over the wreckage their own rules created. Shuta stands before them, exhausted, and buckling under the weight of the iron shell. He demands the courtroom be cleared. The doors are locked. The spectators are thrown out. In the dead silence of the empty hall, the businessman begins to rip his own face off. Shuta confesses. He tells the gods the truth. He's Shanta. We have to look at the psychology of the split. It's a complete pathological fragmentation. Shanta didn't just put on a disguise to trick people. The human mind, when trapped in an environment that actively penalizes empathy, undergoes a violent mitosis. The goodness is buried alive inside the psyche just to keep it safe from the asset of the economy. The outer layer hardens into Shuita, a sociopathic armor designed entirely for survival. It is an evolutionary mutation triggered by an utterly toxic habitat. She had to sever her own emotional limbs to escape the trap. She looks at the gods bleeding from this psychological amputation and tells them exactly how their machine works. Your injunction to be good and yet to live was a thunderbolt. She's telling them that their moral laws are structurally incompatible with the reality they built. And how do the architects of the universe respond to this devastating truth? They close their eyes, not out of mercy, out of maintenance. Admitting what Shanta has become would crash the system, so they don't. They call her good. They call it soul. They float away. And that's the real ending, not her suffering. Their refusal to see it. Then Bertolt Brecht does something violent. He stops to play. An actor steps forward. Apologize, admit to the audience that this is a disaster. The ending is awful. Nothing is resolved. The girl is ruined. The gods are cowards. And the world is still burning. He tells the audience, you write the happy ending. Figure out how to reconcile a human soul with a machine that grinds it into dust. Brecht knew you couldn't do it inside the theater. He built this play to be an engine of persuasion. He wanted you to look out of the doors, look at the streets, look at the architecture of your own life and realize you are part of the exact same algorithm. We are an alienation generation, completely detached from the consequences of our own structures. We expect people to be saints while forcing them to live in slaughterhouses. Shanta's split personality is in a tragic flaw. It's the blueprint of the modern condition. The world is built this way. You either long to see the code or you get crushed by the gears. The stage goes dark. The rest is up to you. People say it's a play about being good. It isn't. 3 doubts arrive on Earth which already tells you something. They aren't there to fix the world. They're belt programmers who's checking if their original software still runs. Is there still such a thing as a good person? To remain good in a world requires a complete break from reality. You must fracture your own identity. You must house a monster within your own skull and feed it to your own survival instinct just to keep breathing. The pathologies and inside Shentates in the air she breathes. She chooses to survive, and in doing so she proves that the system doesn't just steal our labor, it steals our sanity. The exact philosophical bedrock where the clinical critic of Brecht must go away to the pragmatism of the shaman. Brecht is brilliant at showing you to the cage, but he leaves you sitting on the floor of it, staring at the bars in despair. If you stay there, you just become a cynic. Cynicism is just another form of compliance. It's the ego's way of feeling superior to the system it's trapped in. The trickster, the Jungian outsider, offers the only viable exit strategy, and exits from the gravity of the circumstances. Running from the meat grinder just makes you tired meat. If the narrative of the world is inescapable and the economy requires blood, even the gods are bad programmers, and survival requires you to split your soul, then mourning that fact is a waste of time. Don't let the slaughterhouse freeze your soul. Just use coldness as a currency to buy your freedom. Veal, deal, play the pirate and hack the code. Stop trying to be the good person and start asking, who benefits from me trying? That's the alienation. Not from the world, from the script you are handed. The stage goes dark, nothing is resolved. But good, now you can finally see it.